Once upon a time, a huge lizard from a distant planet mated with a Poompa. No one was sure where Poompas came from. All they knew was Poompas tended to look like miniature orange humans and acted like spoiled brats. The lizard and Poompa had a beautiful baby boy whom they loved and cherished. And that boy became a man. And that man became the President of the United States. During the early years of providing for his family, the lizard quickly realized people did not react well to his name. They automatically thought he was slimy. To sound more American, and to help business with a better sounding name, he changed his name from the Lizard to the Grand. He preferred changing it to the KKK, but that name was already taken. The new name quickly paid off, and he earned a lot of money stealing from others. The Grand worked extremely hard at it, and his son inherited his work ethic. Using Daddy's money, the son swindled hundreds of millions from everyone. From the hard-working Americans he loved so much, to the IRS. He became a self-made millionaire by the time he was 8 years old. Well, self-made by Daddy, that is. Although he did earn his first million from his first job. Daddy paid him $10,000 every day for each tooth he brushed. How else do you think the son developed such a big Grinch-like smile? And the son did make many felonies all by himself. Not a million, but certainly hundreds. Anyway, what the son never realized growing up was that both of his parents were illegals. Both came to this planet without receiving the proper authorization. They not only weren't citizens of the United States, they weren't even citizens of Earth. What the president also failed to realize was that many of his Poompa servants were actually part of his family, so he and they were all illegals. They were born in the country, but since their parents were undocumented, they should be, based on the president's own policy, deported. And because the U.S. Constitution has this tiny clause stating a president must be a citizen, the prez should be fired. So when a historian provided the prez with the truth about his lineage, the prez simply couldn't believe it, wouldn't believe it, didn't believe it. The truth was not the truth, and these facts were fake news, as far-fetched as global warming. Why, just this morning he himself was cold when he woke up, and his hands were always cold and clammy. How could there be warming? So he did what he always did when faced with an inconvenient truth. He buried it deep inside his conscience, and no one was sure if that place even existed. But when the vice pres of the United States happened to be passing by and heard what the historian said, the VP felt he had a moral obligation to tell all of the citizens immediately. It had nothing to do with the fact that if the prez were fired, then the VP would become the Big P. The prez knew he must act quickly. Otherwise, he'd have to go back to his job as a carnival barker. So he sent the VP away on a trip. A pointless mission, and one that would take a long time. In fact, the mission could never be accomplished. It was sheer lunacy. The prez sent the VP to build a 10,000-mile wall around the entire country, with one opening so his Russian swimsuit models could still enter. And just as a backup plan, he was going to have them build a wall around Puerto Rico. He learned recently that Puerto Rico is part of the United States, but he didn't want to build a wall to keep people from going out. He wanted to keep aid and money from going in. To be 100% certain he never saw the VP again, the prez instructed the VP he must build the wall using only welfare checks. And then the prez cut off all welfare checks, which he was going to do anyway. No social programs and a lower minimum wage. Two things needed to keep America strong. The VP was not only sure to fail, the prez can keep him away indefinitely. The prez did not want anyone else to suspect he was illegal, so he cracked down on everyone around him, starting with his wife, who was from some country he had never heard of, could never spell, and could barely even pronounce. What a terrible country! For the next few years, he continued the witch hunt, as there seemed to be a never-ending threat to his rightly deserved presidency. The prez fired and deported faster than he could lie, cheat, and tweet, getting rid of anyone who tried to have him fired on these trumped-up fake charges. And just because he could, he not only sent the families away, he broke them up. That will show them not to mess or live in his United States. Families were sure never to see each other or the United States again. He was so pleased with himself that just for giggles, he broke away from the United Nations and NATO, pitiful organizations based on, well, pity. Then one day, he woke up in his palatial palace and found there was no one to make him breakfast. He made the presidential decision to go out and eat, so he called his chauffeur. No answer, just a message stating the chauffeur was now living in Slovenia with his new wife. So he went for a presidential walk and found no restaurants were open. There wasn't even anyone in the tanning salon. How was he going to keep his darkish orange glow? Despite not liking brown people, the president loved to have his skin brown. The only problem was that his Poompa roots made it impossible for him to turn anything other than orange. He continued to walk but could not find anyone. He had fired and deported everyone. There were only two things he enjoyed and knew how to do: offend and wreak havoc. But without anyone around to bark orders and ridicule, the Big P grew bored. He had always fed off chaos and disorder, and now he was starving. No chaos, no disorder, and no idea how to make himself something to eat. To ward off his hunger pains, it took him a while to realize what was going on, as he never had hunger pains. He gave a big speech. He proclaimed up was down, and finally there were no dumb intellectuals to argue his facts. There was no one at all to listen, but that was fine by him. He loved giving speeches, as he got credit over the years for brilliant phrases. He never told anyone that all he did was steal quotes from a book, the biography of some guy in Germany back in the day. After the thunderous applause, well, at least he heard the applause, he got on board his self-driving ship and ordered it to take him to the land of the deported. He arrived in the middle of the night and was happily reunited with many of his old friends, many who had been jailed for lying and swindling. You know, good old boys who were unduly convicted by fake judges. Speaking of which, he looked all over for Justice Kavanaugh, but was told he was having a party. The Prez wanted to congratulate him yet again on being selected a Supreme Court Justice, and how proud he was of the judicial way he conducted himself during the Senate interviews. Judge Kavanaugh whimpered and screamed throughout the process while managing never to answer a question. Who wouldn't want to hire someone like that? Then the Prez saw Vladimir Putin, and that gave the Prez an idea. He needed a new VP, and who could be better qualified than a person who already had those initials? And if Vladdy didn't like being VP, he could be dictator. The Prez just wanted to be sure he was crowned emperor. You see, he never liked the title of president. It sounded so small to him. And he deserved something bigger, something huge. Then the Prez forced as many citizens as he could fit onto his ship. He told everyone to trust in him and everything would be terrific, just like it was for the Native Americans when the first real Americans showed up on the Mayflower, just like it was for the African Americans when they got a free trip to leave their shithole continent and come to America the Beautiful. He even compared his huge self to the small Japanese Americans during World War II. They didn't have to fight during that war, and the Prez didn't have to fight in any war. You see, the Prez had a very bad hangnail in his youth that prevented him from everything except making money and molesting women. When everyone had boarded, the crowned emperor made another huge speech. But what the imp forgot to tell his passengers was one minor detail: his plan to make all of them slaves. He said they wouldn't be slaves, but he misspoke one teensy-weensy word. He meant to say would. They would be slaves. It was just one word, not a big deal. Besides, under his fantastic leadership, they were sure to be happy slaves. Then he went back home to make America orange. Make America Russia for the first time. Sorry, I meant to say make America great again. Just like in the good old days. Like the 40s. No, that was the time of war. The 50s. No, that was the time of hard work. The 1800s. No, the 1700s. I don't know, just the good old days, and stop bothering me with facts and reality.